Hi there, and welcome back again to the Racing Brain. I hope that you have all had a great week and a great start to the month of January as this video is recorded at this time and it should be uploaded at this time on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and that's pretty much it. I'll try to add this video and episode more towards other streaming platforms if I'm able to, but for now, if you're tuning into this, you're basically tuning it to either YouTube, Spotify, or Amazon Music. I'll try to add more, but meanwhile, hope you're enjoying what I have to share within these platforms. So yeah, basically I share my very casual perspective, thoughts and opinions when it comes to everything F1 and maybe other aspects of motorsport as well, from MotoGP, Formula E and so forth. Now without further ado, let's get to the heart of the video itself. And today I would like to basically just touch on the concept of being the hunter or the hunted when it comes to a championship campaign. So in F1, there's the saying that basically if you're in a championship fight, whether it's just between two drivers, three drivers, four drivers, or any other, usually there are two types of role when it comes to the championship scenario. So it's either being the hunter, basically you're in second, third, fourth, or fifth in the championship table, and you're vying for that first spot in the championship table. And so that's being the role of the hunter. And there's also being the role of the hunted, which is where you are at the very top of the championship table and you want to retain it up until the very last race or whatever race it is that will mathematically guarantee you the championship. So what I'm so fascinated about being either the hunter or the hunted when it comes to racing psychology for an F1 driver who is vying for either their first championship, second, third, or beyond is the mindset that comes into play when the driver is either at the very top of it right now and they're trying to consolidate and defend and maintain their lead on the championship versus if they are anywhere behind that, second, third, fourth, or fifth, with a little bit less to lose, not as much leverage, not as much points to play it safe, but basically having to take more risks, but in a way that feels, I guess, more. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, essentially. So, and oftentimes when it comes to being either the hunter or the hunted, the main question is that I always ask myself, and I sometimes ask some of my friends who watch F1 as well, and then I try to get their thoughts as well. In a sense, it's which of the two roles is the probably the best position to be in as a whole. On average, if you try to exclude a lot of external factors like the car performance, reliability, teammate dynamics, the championship year itself, the rivalry, all that, if we exclude all of those factors and just look purely from the sense of either being the hunter or the hunted, which one is the best position to be in for any driver who is in a championship fight? And oftentimes, especially for myself, I just find myself going back and forth in terms of which role do I find it to be the most advantageous. And yeah, because oftentimes it would just, to me, depend on the season and the driver in question. Like in the year 2010, when Sebastian's vying for his first ever world championship, he was in the position of the hunter. But it was very advantageous for him to be the hunter because it allows him to not feel as much pressure when it comes to having to feel like there's a lot that is at stake because it's his first ever world championship, yes, but because he's not at the lead of it, Fernando was in the lead, and probably Seb can feel like he doesn't have to push. He doesn't have, not to say push too much, he doesn't have to be too worried about the various variables. He can just race as he wants to, race as aggressively as hard, and just take more risks, more calculated risks that might pay off. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. But if it does, it does. And what's also helped him in terms of being the hunter in that regard And why it's so much more advantageous, but because there were those other external factors like the car performance, because that Red Bull car in 2010, I would have to say, is much more superior than the Ferrari itself, or even the McLaren. So because of that, because Seb has a car underneath him that he knows he can extract more out of, that will give him more pace, more ultimate pace when he needs to, the car is gonna perform much better than the Ferrari. So being in the position of the hunter, he's able to leverage on that car dynamic, the team dynamic as well, the team strategy, everything in question, just relying on Red Bull to give him the tools available to become the best hunter possible to eventually claim his first world championship. So in that sense, in the year 2010, you could probably say that being the hunter was the best, but it had a few conditions that had to be met. You had to have a pretty quick car, you had to have a pretty reliable and strategic team to support you and everything. And then from Fernando's point of view, you would say that being the hunted is the best because he has the most points. And then as long as he can maintain his lead on the championship, that's fine. But because he doesn't necessarily have the best car, in terms of team, it was all right. But with Ferrari being sometimes Ferrari, in more recent times, Ferrari is just all over the place, I find, when it comes to the strategy and the operations, and not as proactive and nimble. But I find that at least in the early 2010s, they were not as bad. They were pretty good, but not to the same level as like Red Bull, I would find. Not as risk-taking, not as sharp, not as decisive. So I think because of that, Fernando didn't have all the best tools that he can leverage on as the hunted. So then in the year 2010, you could, for example, say that being the hunter was the best option. Now as we go forward then to as recent as just last year, 2025. Now, there is the position of being the hunter and the hunter as well. And in terms of being the hunter, it was Max and Oscar being the hunter. And then for Lando, it was being the hunted. Now, if you're looking at 2025, one could probably say that maybe being the hunted is probably the best, because for Lando, he has the McLaren car underneath him, which throughout the year is pretty much the fastest car. Now, obviously, there are times when the Red Bull might be on par or a little bit faster, but it is not consistent. The Red Bull car is not as consistent throughout the entire race calendar. There will be races where it's really up to scratch or even more superior than the McLarens. But I think on average, the McLarens are still better. And because of that, and generally, Lando knows that he can extract more out of the McLaren. He has like a really decent team behind to support him in terms of strategy and so forth. So that's where, because Lando has all those tools that he knows that he can utilize and leverage on to match what Max has and even Oscar has, because Lando and Oscar are teammates. And because of that, and being in the position of the hunted, that probably makes it so that probably being the hunter is the best position to be in. And then he eventually claimed his first ever world championship. So that's why I find that when I want to compare, or at least when I want to share my thoughts on which one is better, objectively being the hunter or the hunted, it's hard to say, because the various external factors will definitely determine which scenario will play out. And then inevitably, what's the answer? Being the hunter or the hunter. So like in 2010, I would say for me personally, being the hunter is the best. 2025, being the hunted, or even like 2016, when Lewis and Nico were head-to-head for the World Championship, when Nico eventually won. Nico Rosberg, by the way, not Nico Hülkenberg, just in case those who don't know. Being the hunter at the time was probably more advantageous, because Nico just had to make sure that he kept his lead, even though it was onto the final race. But being the hunted was the best position for him to be in, because he just had to finish right behind Lewis the entire part of the remainder of the race for 2016, and he would become the world champion. So it really depends from season to season, and what the factors at play will influence the answer. But then I find myself very intrigued by the notion of which really objectively is the best if we exclude all those factors and we just look at the concept and the idea of being either the hunter or the hunted in isolation. if we remove the fact that there's a car advantage, team advantage, whatever, all of those that I just shared, because it's hard. It really is hard because from season to season, the external factors will always have a say in it, very, very significant say in it. Sometimes maybe less, especially when the car and the team and the driver is so dominant that nothing matters. But usually, the external factors will come into play when it comes to being the hunter or the hunted in a championship fight. But then if we were to remove all of that and to just look at the concept itself, the idea itself, which one is the best? Obviously, I'm sharing this from the perspective of a F1 fan since 2010, and these are obviously my casual perspectives, opinions, and thoughts. But for me, just the more I think about it, between me and the hunter and hunter, I think when I first started watching F1 and whatnot, I would most of the time think that being the hunter is just always going to be the best position, because in my mind it takes the pressure off of the driver in question. They don't have to think too much about, am I going to lose this championship because I'm in the lead right now? Can I maintain it? There's not much of that at play. Obviously, what may be in play instead is like, can I catch up? Can I catch up? Can I finally get it? Oh, can I finally get to the lead of it? But that one, at least I feel like it's more incentivizing for them. It's more like the carrot at play rather than the stick, because they are incentivized to try and make life difficult for the one who is in the lead, and then to try and take points off, do all these things, and even if things don't pan out, because they know they're not in the lead, so they're like, doesn't matter, at least I tried, at least I made my case, and then the one in the lead will be the one the most pressure. That's usually what I used to think when it comes to being the hunter, and why I used to also think that probably being the hunter was the best position to be in. But as I find myself now in 2026, almost, I guess, around 15 years or more watching F1 to the level that I have been doing, I don't know, it's after seeing so many championship fights. Obviously there's a lot during my time watching F1 where it has been mostly dominant seasons where being the hunter or hunter didn't really matter, but there were ones that did matter in the end. And I have to say that after so many championship fights that I've watched, I find myself now leaning more towards feeling like actually being in the position of the hunted is the best position to be in if we exclude all external factors, if we just look at the two different roles in isolation. Now, why would I say that now when at the very start of me watching F1 I felt like being the hunter was the best? I would have to say, because if, let's say, we remove all those factors, if we remove like pressure, remove team advantage, car advantage, all those, it really is the most advantageous position to be in is the one with the most points. As simple as that. And because being in the position of the hunted means that you are already in the lead, you have already made it there, so you have the points advantage, whether it's minuscule or vast. If it's vast, then obviously usually those are dominant seasons, and that's why I also have to think about it, because even in those dominant seasons when being the hunter or hunter didn't matter, but throughout those dominant spells, dominant years, it's always the hunted who has won, even though we shouldn't really view them as being the hunted, because nobody was hunting them really. But if we look at it purely in the sense every year has to have hunters and the hunted, then being in the hunter position is always going to be the best position to be in, because that means that you're already starting off with a points advantage. Now, obviously, being in those dominant seasons, there are the external factors of dominant car, dominant team, and everything. Yes, I know by sharing that, I'm probably introducing a bit of external factors again. But so let me rephrase it again. Being the hunted, to me, at least I feel, is the best, because it starts off with a points advantage, and regardless of how the next few rounds go, being at a points advantage, and if, let's say, both drivers, like both the hunter and the hunted, have a similar level of mental strength, race pace, qualifying pace, team advantage, car advantage, everything, if we say, is all equal, neck and neck, just very identical, like they're twins, racing clones or whatever, then again, being in the position of the hunted is the best, because if both can handle pressure at the same level and whatnot, and can adjust and adapt at the same rate, at same level, everything, then yeah, having the most points is the best position to be in, and more likely than not will guarantee the championship. And then for the hunter to usually prevail would require those external factors to come into play, because the more I think about it, in 2010, Seb had the Red Bull car advantage, team advantage. In 2021, even though Lewis didn't win the world championship as the position of the hunter in the last few races, but up until the last race in Abu Dhabi, when they were level on points, at that time the Mercedes was starting to pick up and become the better performing car than the Red Bull, and it was hard for Max to keep Lewis at bay at the time, to the point where he had to make really skirt the very fine lines of the rule book in order to try to maintain his points advantage and his lead in the position of the championship. But up until the very last race, they were level on points. So, and that only happened in the sense that Lewis was able to force his case until the very last race, because in terms of being the hunter, because of car advantages and stuff. So that's why I'm starting to feel like oftentimes being the hunter means that a lot of things have to go in your favor before you're able to become objectively in a better position. Because otherwise, if everything is equal, then being the hunter is always going to be the best. Because if both sides of the camp have the same number of tools, same number of things to leverage on and everything, same ability, same talent, same mindset, then yeah, having the points advantage as the hunted is always going to be the best. Now, obviously, by sharing this, I guess there's two sides to it. On the one side, it's very simplistic and simple to say that, and yes, it's like saying being the hunted, yeah, as simple as that, points advantage. But I guess it's also not as simple as that, because being in the position of the hunted often means is that the legwork was already done to have reached that point, and oftentimes to have reached that point meant that whoever has reached the position of the hunter earned it, obviously through those external factors at play and whatnot. But if we were to just view at it again from that point on, being in a level playing field, yeah, being the hunted, it's just, the more I think about it, it really favors that role. It favors the role of being in the lead from the very start, or from whatever point that we decide to consider the argument itself, or the discussion itself. So yeah, that's my casual perspective, thoughts and opinions when it comes to the role of being the hunter or the hunted, and which one do I find to objectively be the best position to be in. I have to say, at least for right now, and as of the time of this video and of the time of my own perspective and whatnot at this time, I have to say it's being the hunted. Now, obviously, any of you may have differing opinions and thoughts and perspectives from me, and that's absolutely fine, because your case for why maybe being the hunter is the better position to be in may be stronger than what I have brought forward. And I would look forward to hear about that in the comments below, whether on YouTube, Spotify, wherever. Please share your comments as to why you might feel like being the hunter is actually the better position to be in, or if you are in agreement with me in that being the hunter, yes, it's objectively the best position to be in, and you may have your unique reasons as to why that's the case, that I haven't touched on. Please do share as well, because I would like to learn from all of you. And as I said, I'm just an F1 fan since 2010, and I'm enjoying every single season of F1 so far, and I'm sure I will continue to enjoy them for the years and decades to come. And yes, that includes the dominant seasons too, because I not only watch them for the spectacle and the drama of the championship fights, as this video tends to touch on in terms of championship fights, but I also enjoy the racing psychology, the why drivers do this and that. And so even in dominant spells, I find myself enjoying dissecting those aspects of the sport itself. Yeah, so yeah, and with that basically concludes this video, and I have my answer. Being the hunter is the best position to be in, but that's just my personal thoughts. Feel free to share your comments as to which side of the camp you're on, and Thank you. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please, again, also feel free to leave a general comment or anything. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you want to constantly get notified and updated of any upcoming videos, the notification bell as well. If you're on Spotify, on Amazon Music, hit the follow button, and then you can stay updated on any new episodes that come out from there. So yeah, thank you, and I hope that everyone's having an excellent January. And yeah, I'll see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye.